coffee. How great. All right, we are live. Live. We are live on the Instagram and on the YouTube's channel. So welcome to today, which is the 4th of May, 2022. 4 days into May. We're getting it. We're getting through this 2022 thing. We're doing it together, so that's great. This is the sit rep for today. So a lot of stuff that's happened. I was kind of like thinking maybe I'm not going to do one today, but then I got many different messages overnight and this morning, and one in particular that's kind of piqued my ire, if you will, made me a bit pissed off. But before we jump into the stories and stuff like that, and by way of explanation, what this is kind of my postcards from the end of the world, if you will. The sit rep is where I go through different news stories and things that I've seen overnight and kind of pull them out, things that pique my interest and trends that I'm seeing happening in the world at the moment that I want to, kind of highlight to people, and then talk about it from the prepping perspective. So how we best prepare ourselves as individuals for disaster, and how we can best make ourselves more self-reliant in the future so that we don't necessarily need to be affected by some of these things that are obviously going to happen, because our world, in case you haven't noticed, our world is getting a little bit harder at the moment, and I think it's about to get a lot harder. That's kind of like the prepper mindset, is how do I build resilience into my own life? Okay, a couple of things before I kick off too. Yesterday, I was a bit out of it on the SitRep. So those of you who watched it may have noticed. And I said, I haven't had enough coffee. Turns out I actually had concussion. So like that dopiness did not go away for a fair chunk of the day. And then I was actually at the physiotherapist and said, I took a big hit in the head playing basketball. You can kind of see I got a bit of a black eye here. And he was talking to me. He's like, yeah, you've got concussion, bro. So that kind of explains a lot why I was a bit out of it yesterday morning. But yeah, it wasn't just that I hadn't had enough coffee. I'm sure coffee probably factored in there somehow. So if you're watching that one yesterday, or you go back and watch that one, my bad. I mean, not my bad. That's what was going on. It wasn't that the reptilian overlords had taken my mind or anything. Putin hadn't poisoned me with some sort of radioactive substance in my coffee. It was just that I got hit in the head, just adding to that TBI that I've probably already got from my years of military service. Okay, second thing that I want to talk about first off this morning is, first thing I want to talk about. Anyway, tonight I'm doing a live with the Sydney Freedom community. It'll be me, Lauren, Evelyn Ray, and a bunch of people who are going to be speaking on the weekend, Saturday up at Bondi at the Free at the Sea Festival. We're going to be doing a live tonight. I'll be jumping on for I don't know how long, a couple of minutes or whatever, and just giving a bit of a talk about what myself and Lauren are going to be talking about this weekend. So if you're interested in that, jump on that live tonight. I think it's at 7. I can check that. Anyway, it'll be in my stories. I'll flood my stories with information about it after this. Okay, so that's that. So yep, jump on that live tonight, and obviously this Saturday 1 p.m. Bondi, I'll be up in Sydney talking, giving you all a chat about stuff and things, community building, self-reliance, gold and silver, which has been doing interesting things lately. The last couple of days, especially the silver market's been pretty good price. All right, let's jump into these stories, and I'm going to start off with the thing that's probably most on my mind at the moment. Actually, no, I'll get something else out of the way right now. The whole thing that's going on in the US at the moment, the abortion Supreme Court ruling. Look, I'm not yes or no, or or I'm not going to talk about what side I am of that fence, and I don't really care what side you're on of that fence. What I want to talk about is the actual effects of this sort of thing. So what we're going to see here is increased civil disorder to possibly a larger magnitude than we've seen before in the US, and they've been pretty freaking big in the US, I think you'll agree, ever since the Black Lives Matters, or even really since the Me Too sort of movement started kicking off. They've had an increase in the frequency of civil disorder events, i.e. riots, and the veracity or the consequence of those events. They've been quite large. So I think this contentious issue will, at the very least, see extreme rioting. At the very least, what the US is sitting on at the moment, they're kind of like a powder keg that's ready to explode. They have been building up this pressure, and they've been building up the tit for tat. And I haven't really mentioned it on this, but a few years ago, well, back just before Trump got in, I started talking about this left-right politics within the US because I used to go there every year and experience what was going on there quite a bit. That what was actually going to happen was this increase in the left, I guess, is the more peaceful tree hugging side, and the right has been the guns and America sort of side. But what we've seen since Trump is the rise of the militant left. And I actually said to a lot of people, I don't really like, it doesn't factor into me too much who actually is ruling that country at any given time. Like, I'm not pro-Trump, I'm not pro-Biden. I don't really give a shit because they're not my country. It's not my circus, not my monkeys, right? So what I do care about, though, is this increase, because as America goes, the rest of the world goes. So I actually said to people, I think, like, not that I particularly wanted Trump to get in or didn't want him to get in, but I think it would be better for the world if he did serve a second term, because it would actually keep some sort of status quo there, where we've had 4 years of the left increasing in their anger and their violence, and the right sort of being like, whoa, hang on, that's usually our spot, and now that's flipped. And so the safety mechanisms, I think, that were on the right, who I think probably have a longer history, because they're more likely to be ex-military or military serving people, so they've got more capacity for violence. And now with the left increasing in violence, that would actually take the safety mechanism off the right. And so that's what I think we're actually seeing. And then it just becomes an arms race, and where we find ourselves today is getting towards the end of this arm race. And this is just a whole lot of babble of what I'm talking about, and everyone wants to hear that word, civil war. I don't think it'll be a civil war, and it certainly won't be the civil war that America experienced a couple of 100 years ago. But there is something there that at its worst could be something akin to a civil war. So that's why I said I think the best case scenario really that we're going to see now is the best of the worst is just extreme rioting. Where this could go is something big. So I just wanted to clear that off because that's probably filling everyone's feeds this morning. If you're anything like me, I can't get away from it. So there's that whole case thing that's come out. Also, the other part of this is the leaking of it as well. So again, whatever side of the fence you sit on, yep, that's cool. You don't necessarily need to tell me because I don't necessarily care about your opinion. But this sort of information being leaked, this is another thing that I look at and I'm like, wow, like this would have been unfathomable that the Supreme Court could have just, whoops, here's some documents that we're about to pass or that we're letting through. Or it should have been very much open source information right from the start. So the fact that this has come out and people are like, whoa, this is getting snuck through, there's some dodgy shit going on there that I think is symptomatic of the actual disease that we're seeing. And with a lot of the stories I talk about, it's essentially that. What I'm looking at is not the story itself, it's how this is a symptom of what is actually wrong with our society, what's going on underneath. And then if we can see this thing that's going on underneath, the cancer that is growing within our society, then we can actually start to go, okay, no, let's not join the circus here. Let's become more self-reliant and do our own thing, buoy ourselves up. What's one of the things that I always say that you can do to become more self-reliant? Grow your own food. Grow a fucking garden. Do it now. Well, here's the big story that I wanted to kick off with. I got sent this message that apparently Dan Andrews, the Supreme Overlord of Victoria, so for those of you who aren't Australian, Victoria, of the prisoner island that is Australia, Victoria is possibly the most authoritarian state in that entire nation. You could argue that Western Australia is too, but I think Western Australia should start to be considered not part of Australia anymore. I'm pretty sure they're about to secede away from us, but these are all jokes, by the way. not being serious about any of this before people start getting offended or anything about it. But so Dan Andrews has been known for his extreme measures, has been known for his ability to turn this crisis into opportunity for him to reinforce his power and to gain more power over individuals in Victoria. By the way, I was born in Victoria, I was raised in Victoria. I love Victoria, it's a great place. And so this saddens me to see information like this, that essentially they're passing a bill, the Agricultural Legislation Amendment Bill 2022, which is talking about biosecurity. Okay. Pretty innocent looking thing, and it seems to make sense. We need to look after biosecurity and stuff like that. We need to look after people like landholders and make sure that everyone's doing the right thing, stock and animals, all this sort of stuff. We need to look after these things, right? However, it's the subtext of these sorts of things and what their abilities actually stretch to. So what these are stretched to is essentially, and how it could manifest, and quite possibly could manifest, judging by the way that Dan Andrews has acted in the past and how Victoria has been heading, is that this could make backyard gardens illegal. And I'm talking about, there's already fines for biosecurity sort of risks and things like that they could come in and say, okay, we'll give you an $1,800 fine, which is a lot for most people. But, some of us could okay, whatever. That's now increased from $1,800 to $10,000 for an individual if caught out doing this. But that's not even the start. That's just the fine, right? And fines, I always like to say, is being able to do something illegal for a price. So there's always somebody who's going to just pay a fine and go, yep, no worries, I'm going to continue what I'm doing. But that's just the first part of it. The second part of it is that they have actual authorized officers now within this department that can come in to your domicile, to your land, and inspect it and deem it illegal. They can then destroy it. And then on top of that, if they destroy it, they'll give you a bill for the destruction of your own food. This sort of shit is horrifying. Like, I'm looking at the whole Ministry of Truth sort of stuff in the US, and I'm like, wow, I read 1984. This is crazy. But it's a little bit like watching a TV show when I'm looking at stuff in the US, because I don't live there. When this stuff is happening in our own backyard, literally in our own backyard, when we've got authorized officers who can come into our own backyard, pull out our food, burn it, and then give us not only a fine for doing that, but a bill on top of that for the privilege of having them come and destroy our own food. This takes away an individual's right, basic right to grow your own food. And this is the sort of thing that nobody should be accepting at any point. I don't give a fuck what biosecurity bullshit laws they're putting out there. This is absolutely something that we should be irate about. And there is no way that anyone should stand for this. So if you're Victorian, I would highly recommend, even if you're not Victorian and you can somehow affect this, then I would highly recommend that you do this. And as a form of protest, then all of us should be staunch in growing our own food right here and now. We should have food crops growing in every single garden, in every single front yard, on every single nature strip out the front, as a big fuck you. There's no way that you can take food out of people's mouths, because this is how they control people. And this is how nations have controlled people for a long, long time. And Lauren, you're absolutely right. This is why we need a Bill of Rights. And people don't understand this, that in Australia, we think that we're this, lovely free country. There are a whole heap of things, a whole heap of mechanisms, really basic mechanisms that we don't have. The thing that tweaked me onto this was they started talking about writing in the Aboriginal people, the Indigenous people of Australia, into our constitution or into our fundamental documents within Australia. And I was like, what? What do you mean they're not in there? And so then I went and read it, and I was like, there's a lot of shit that's not in here. When people are out on the streets rioting for their rights as human beings, I often go you do realize that actually by the law, we don't have these rights. It's not within the Australian scope. This is why we need to actually, from a fundamental standpoint, go, wait, what is Australia? Who are we as a people? Let's have our say. Let's actually put this forward, and let's actually write this out and get it solidly down. And then we know what our left and right is. Because without that, we can be easily swept aside. And technically, and that's is what's happened over the last 2 years. All right, so that's probably the two big things that I want to start off with. This food thing, it sends me mental. It's really crazy. Like at the end of the day, though, there's no way I'm going to stop growing food. All right, there is no way that I'm going to do it. I mean, the only way you will stop me growing food is to either drag me away in chains or to kill me, and that's it. All right, I'm not going to stop. I don't care what rules you put in. I don't care what fines you give me. I will not stop it. And if I have the ability, I will not stop supplying it to other people as well. So that's my stand on that. But be warned of this sort of stuff. As a caveat to this entire piece as well, I haven't gone through with a fine-tooth comb through this actual proposed bill. So I do need to do that. I may be jumping the gun a little bit here, but this is what it looks like on the surface and from the bits that I have actually read. So I do need to delve into it. If anyone else has delved into it, please send me a message. Let's chat about it. I want to get my head as around this as I possibly can. All right, on with the news. What's happening in the world? All right, let's keep with food sort of stuff now. People are starting to realize that this food shortage is a big deal. And that getting out of it isn't as simple as the mechanisms that we had to get out of problems in the past. The only thing, hey Lauren, how you on? Lauren says, the only thing that should be able to supersede our laws is International Human Rights Charter. But Dan actually already violated that and nothing has happened. Yep. It's kind of like this. There's these violations of it, but they're soft violations. It's almost like a gaslighting violation that we're seeing happen in Australia of human rights. And yeah, what can we do about it? At the end of the day, the government rules through violence. And I've put videos out on this, and go check out my YouTube video on why violence matters. And you can hopefully then get your head around, or at least get your head around how I understand how our government works, which is at gunpoint. And if you don't believe me, my saying is, if you don't believe that the government rules through violence, stop paying taxes. See what happens. All right. How have we got out of trouble in the past, 50 years, 60 years? Anything that's happened, any little catastrophes that have occurred, any dips in our economic well-being, we printed money. Essentially, like that's what it's come down to. We've done other mechanisms, but essentially we've printed money. Well, printing money is not going to grow more food, unfortunately. Growing food is going to grow more food. So I think people are starting to twig onto this. So there's a bit of a story on Zero Hedge here about this that I recommend people go and read. Politicians aren't going to be able to do this. Politicians don't grow food. Okay, politicians' speeches don't grow food. Wishes and promises don't grow food. Farmers grow food. Individuals grow food. This is where we need to be actually putting our minds, our effort, our time, our money, everything that we can into these people, into yourself, into your family, into your garden, into local farmers. This is where we need to start doing it. And if I sounded probably a little bit more like direct this morning, it's because I am. It's because of this story that I've seen that I'm like, whoa, this is something actually, this is not just me tinkering away in the background, growing a couple of tomatoes. Now we need to actually like up gear a little bit and put the foot down a little bit and actually start going for it. All right. Let's talk about some weather effects and stuff that's going on. Again, I'll jump into the US, talking about Arizona. Experts warn Arizona is entering an era of limits when it comes to the state's water future. Food is one thing. Food gets grown with water, though, and humans need water to survive, fundamentally, and food. So without these two things, we're in trouble. Water is also something. Water was actually the thing that probably 10 years ago, I was predicting this is going to be the next thing that we're fighting wars over. As it turns out, it's not overtly yet that, but it could be soon. And I think the food crisis will actually hit before the water crisis hits, but water crisis will hit. So this is another thing we really need to start thinking about. This is how do we secure our own personal water supply? I was chatting to somebody on Instagram last night who was saying, hey, I remember that living up in Queensland, I think this was back in the 80s or 90s, they made tank water illegal, so you couldn't harvest rainwater off your own roof. They used some sort of biosecurity laws. They used some sort of health reasons that, like, oh yeah, there's bats poo on your roof, and then you're going to get these diseases. We don't want people to have these diseases, so no rainwater. And then they started hitting drought conditions. People were like boring for water, and then it got overturned at some stage, and people could do it. But this is the sort of thing, like, government's telling us what we can and can't do when it comes to the fundaments of life, the actual essential things that we need in life. Government's telling us that you can't grow this, that you can't harvest that. Like, that's as basic human right as you can get, as far as I'm concerned. That is as basic as you get. Food, water, shelter, security. These sorts of things should be untouchable from a government. If a human being wants to go out and get those things themselves or build those things themselves, then this should be untouchable from a government standpoint. And yet what we're seeing is they're touching it. Ooh, they're touching it. Please show the courtroom where the bad government touched your rights. Everywhere. Huge blaze burns across 250 hectares of forest in Russia's Krasnoyarsk. My Russian is not so good. Krasnoyarsk region. So one of the interesting things that I thought about this is a pretty huge fire, right? That's burning out of control. Huge blaze in Russia, and I found it on the Russian propaganda channels that I also follow. Nothing on mainstream media, nothing on the Western side. It's like Russia is this massive black hole of information at the moment from one side of the world, or from a huge chunk of the world. And there's important stuffs. There's important things that are actually going on there. These huge fires that are burning out of control. So the Northern Hemisphere at the moment is coming into their fire season. I said this after the fires in Australia in 2019, that I think what we're going to start to see is a big change in how we actually construct seasons in our head. We're going to see more extremes. We're going to have an official fire season. There's going to be a part where we don't really call summer anymore. We call it fire, or it might be early autumn, fire season, fire peak season, summer, autumn, fire off season, or something like that. I don't know. There's going to be this huge shift in what we're doing, where we're going to start to see these fires, which are already happening. They're creeping earlier and earlier, and they're going to start burning through spring. As soon as it's not super cold, bang, fires. We're into it. As soon as things dry out enough, fires. And then floods, and then rain, erosion, which is just exacerbating all these problems that are going to keep getting worse and worse and worse and more extreme. Keep your eye on these sorts of events. I think the weather sort of stuff is a huge thing. We really need to pay attention to it, and we really need to start building it into our own lives, how we are best going to do this. I highly recommend that you do things like join the RFS, join the SES, or something like that, or maybe not necessarily do those things, but learn those sorts of skills, because you're going to have to deal with it at some stage. Okay, so I was talking about riots in the US, that we're going to start to see riots in the US. There are a number of riots going on right now around the world too. And again, like I always try and do, let's take a step back and try and look at the bigger picture here. We can get really focused because our news feed is just smashing us with Roe versus Wade, Supreme Court of the US. And you know what? The US isn't the entirety of the world. There's other things going on. Police clash with Mayday protesters in Istanbul. So Istanbul is having riots. We're seeing riots and police extreme measures in Israel. We're seeing it in Paris, in France. There's a number of others that I'm actually forgetting right now, and I should have written them down. But what we're seeing is a whole heap of civil disorder. And I've said this for the past couple of sit reps, that we're going to see more and more of this civil disorder throughout the world. So prepare thyself for this. Know what the indicators of these sorts of things are, and I would highly recommend that you don't go into them. If you can, avoid them. So don't go into these areas if they're happening, unless you're particularly motivated to go and join it. But be safe out there. Be smart about it. Where else are we? Sandstorm covers Iraqi capital, which isn't like totally out of the blue. I guess sandstorms do happen in places like this throughout the Middle East. What was interesting, though, that a similar sort of thing happened in Kazakhstan on Monday. And like, if you see the footage of these sandstorms, they're like pretty full on. The other full-on thing is that it's happening in a city. Generally, we see it sort of more rural areas, so they're actually sweeping in through cities. We can kind of see like there's some larger environmental or weather effects that are causing this behind it. What we're seeing, all these little things, they're just bigger. They're again, symptoms of what the bigger problem is. Kazakhstan, and by the way, why I mentioned Kazakhstan's nowhere near Iraq. Like, there's a bit of distance between those two countries. So the fact that Kazakhstan got hit by these sorts of things, and then all of a sudden Iraq got hit by these sorts of things, these sandstorms, it's interesting to see that that's a pretty big distance that similar effects are happening in the world. But again, that time of the year, what we're seeing is whatever weather effect is going to affect a certain area, that will happen. Is going to affect a certain area, that will happen. All right, I think I'm up to gas stuff now. Last little thing on food is the food bank in the US. Places where people who are close to poverty or very low socioeconomic standing who can't afford food and go and take food from food banks. Their demand in these food banks has apparently soared. So inflation in the US is currently crushing these sort of poorer classes, being that sort of poverty line, low, medium even, or low mid socioeconomic is being dragged down. People in that middle level are being dragged down into the mid-low or even to low now because of inflation. So the demand is soaring, and I think that's going to increase. I don't think inflation is going anywhere by the looks of it. Why do I think that? Australia just came out and said they just dropped a rate hike, which I think if you're looking at the state of the world, like, was blatantly fucking obvious that it was going to happen, despite the RBA, the Reserve Bank of Australia, coming out and consistently saying like, oh no, I don't think we will. I think everything's fine. I think we're going to be cool. Don't worry about it. I was like, are these guys on drugs? Seriously, are you smoking crack? What information are you looking at that says that you should not raise the rates right now? And looking at the rest of the world, watching them raise rates at a rapid rate. So the RBA was saying this, and I'm like, this is just lying, and I don't know why anyone is buying into this. And everyone's like, well, the RBA said they're not going to raise rates. And then they did raise rates, and everyone's like, they raised rates. I can't believe they raised rates. It's like, what world are you living on? But the other part of this that I find so frustrating is that we're consistently getting lied to by these people, and they are consistently doing it for their own good. They know if they came out and said, hey, rate's going to rise, yep, they think it would affect things. Maybe they're thinking that if they kind of fudge the truth or overtly lie like they have here, up until the point where you have to actually swallow that pill, that they're doing the righty. They're kind of saving us from economic effects in the short term rather than the long term. But I don't know what's going on there, what their thinking is, and I don't really care. What we should pull out of this is that when we're seeing what is being said from our politicians, when we're seeing what is being said from our financial ministers, when we're seeing what's being said from our financial sector and our RBA or our reserve banks or whoever, we should not necessarily believe it. In fact, we should probably not believe it at all, because they have consistently lied to us. And this is just yet another example where they've kind of been saying, like, signaling like, oh, no, I don't think it's the time yet to raise rates. Rates will go up in the future, but not quite yet. And they're like, hey, rates, quick, take them. They're going up, and they'll continue to go up. I think they can't not, unless Like they want inflation to go to hyperinflation. So, yep, don't listen to these people. Or, as I like to say, don't believe the words, believe the actions. Okay, so with anything that I'm always looking at the words and I'm going, okay, well, why is that being said? Who's saying that? And what does it actually mean? What, as I was saying, how is this a symptom of what the actual cause is? And I'm always thinking, well, that's just them saying that. What are they actually doing? And that's been a kind of almost a saving grace, I think, for me, for the Ukraine crisis, the war that's going on there, where there was all these things being said, but then I was actually looking at the solid information that was being reported. So what is Russia doing versus what are they saying? What is the West doing rather than what they're saying? Because if we have learnt nothing from the last 2 years, we should learn this, that we are currently in an abusive relationship with our governments, and they are gaslighting us constantly. They are telling us that they are not turning up the heat while they're sitting there with their hand on the thermostat going, no, it's not getting hotter in here. No, you're not sweating. So my advice is for us as people who want to prepare for the futures, don't listen to this shit. Don't put up with it. You don't need to be in a abusive relationship. You're better than that. Okay, where else are we going to go today? There's a lot of oil, gas sort of stuff, and I'll just kind of try and summarize this. There's a whole heap of stories that have come out of it. Hungary's in the firing line. I talked about this yesterday. Hungary has come out and said, look, we're going to pay for gas in rubles because we need it. We're reliant on it. Okay. And you're not giving us some sort of alternative. And so they came out and said that, and there was a backlash against Hungary. And then Hungary came out and said, well, it's not just us. There's 9 other nations in the EU who are doing it, and we'll name them if you keep saying this. And everyone was like, oh, shit. No, we're going to get gas from Africa. We're getting it from North Africa. Okay, so that might materialize in a year's time. A year isn't now. They need gas now. So they're going to have to start buying it now. So Hungary just came out again and said, look, we're being unfairly attacked about this, and we have to buy this gas off Russia. There is no alternative right now. So now the EU has actually come out, or the powers that be have come out and said, we're thinking of putting sanctions on EU. If this is not cutting off your own nose despite your face, I don't know what is. Like, this is literally the snake eating its own tail. This is like them destroying themselves, not subtly, which they have been doing through these sanctions, going, we're punishing Russia, and really they're hitting a big piece of rubber with a stick and watching it smack into their own face consistently. What they're doing now is watching it smack into their own face and going, oh, this is bad. I need to stop this. So I'm going to cut this thumb off. I don't know any other way to describe this. This is just utter madness, and this is watching the EU self-destruct in a literal sense, tear itself apart. I keep saying this, that the EU, I think that we get presented this united front that the EU has, and I'm just actually like, I'm not listening to what they're telling me anymore. I'm looking at what's happening, and I'm going, it's not true. You're not a united front. You guys are falling apart, and you need to do something about that. Yeah, so you'll see a lot of news about stuff coming out of Africa. You'll see a lot of news about them switching to renewables as well. I love renewables. I'm all about it. I just don't think it's realistic with the current society that we have, with the current amount of people we have, that renewables in the current state that they are going to fill that gap. It's not going to happen. You said EU put sanction on EU. That's exactly what, as I read it. The EU sanctioned. If I said EU sanctioning EU, what I mean is EU sanctioned Russia, but the effects of it were felt on the EU. Is there any truth to the agricultural bill change to state that we can't grow our own food? Any truth? This is what I started off with this morning, Kat. So just as reiteration from that, I haven't picked through the bill yet. I will try and do that today. so the summation of it, of what I was saying this morning, is that it does look like it's that there will be the ability for them to say you cannot grow your food, or to fine you and then destroy your food that you've grown, and then pay you for the cost of that destruction. So yeah, that's what we're looking at with that, and that's pretty disturbing. Yes, I meant the EU is going to, or the West, or whomever is going to sanction Hungary. They're looking at sanctioning Hungary. Sorry if that's confusing in any way. I didn't mean it to be confusing. It's just probably me rambling. Let me see. There was some other news that I wanted to show you. Yeah, EU considers exemptions as Hungary threatens to veto Russian oil ban. So essentially, what they're saying is, we're going to punish you now, Hungary, which kind of reminds me of what a lot of the, dare I say, left, if I can use that term, what they have doing, or at least like cancel culture. It's kind of like cancel culture, where everyone gets on what they have doing, or at least like cancel culture. It's kind of like cancel culture, where everyone gets on, oh, we've got to cancel this, we've got to cancel this. And then when they've canceled enough people, then they start turning inside and go like, wait, you're not cancelly enough. We're going to cancel you too. And we're going to cancel you. And it's, they'll start cutting off their own hands and feet. Let's talk about North Korea very quickly, and then some cyber stuff. So North Korea, Kim Jong-un has come out and has given a warning that they will do preemptive nuclear strike if North Korea is threatened. What does that mean, like threatened? Who's threatening North Korea, and what does he define as a threat? But it looks like they might actually do another nuclear test in the not too distant future. Some reports are saying from weeks to months away, they might actually test a nuclear weapon. That's not a good thing. And then once they've got that, what I'm seeing actually in the news from all the stuff that's happening with North Korea is them getting more and more bold and doing more and more things. We've seen more missile launches. We've seen more technical missiles. We've seen more propaganda coming out. We've seen more rhetoric and talk about what they're going to do. So, and we've seen this with a number of countries, but North Korea is a really good example of it, that what we're seeing is a fractious West. What we're seeing is a weakened US. And now is the time where these other parties that have been kind of waiting, or these other nations that have been waiting, are jumping in and stepping up their game, swinging their dicks around, as it were. Isn't sanctions saved for like war crimes, not just buying oil? Well, I mean, this is the thing. We have been increasingly allowing language to get more and more slippery. This is an opinion piece, by the way. We've been increasingly allowing language to get more and more slippery and to infer different things. So the inference is that if you are buying Russian oil, you are supporting Russia, and Russia is fighting a war against Ukraine, which we don't like. Ergo, you are part of the war effort for Russia for the wrong side. So that is a war crime, because they're committing a war crime by doing that. It's a long pull to get that one. That is a pretty big stretch, I think, of logic. In fact, that's what I would call a logical fallacy, essentially. But that's kind of what the West is saying here. They're saying, "Hey, Hungary, you're pro-Russian." Again, we've come into this sort of cancel culture sort of thing. You either are in the group or you're out. There's no black and white. There's no left and right in this argument. You are us or you are them. So get on the right side. Get on the right side of history here. So that's essentially what they're saying. Hungary's saying, there are needs that our people have. I like keep warm and cook food and, run industry and all these sorts of things that require stuff from Russia at the moment. And so if Russia needs us to pay in rubles, then we're going to do that. So, there are always two sides to the argument. Where you land on that, I don't know, and I don't really care so much. But it's just it's just an interesting perspective to look at it from. That essentially, that the EU is is turning the screws on someone like Hungary, and Hungary's digging their heels in. Because at the end of the day, unless they front up with this natural gas or this oil, their people of the nations of EU are going to start rising up. They're going to start doing something about it. No person is going to sit there and go like, wait, this doesn't make sense. I'm going to allow you to take away all this stuff from me so I can support Ukraine. Maybe if they believe the propaganda that's going on, they will. All right, last little thing that I'll talk about. Swisscom suffered a general internet outage on Tuesday evening that lasted about an hour, which users across Switzerland were affected. Is this a big deal? No one cares, right? I don't live in Switzerland. You probably don't live in Switzerland. If you do, hey, how you going, Switzerland? But what this is important, I always like to highlight these little things that I see in the news where we see disruptions to the internet to remind people that this is not written in stone. This is not an ancient Egyptian pyramid. Everything that man has built can go away. Everything that we have right now can go away, and especially much more so the things that we have built in the last probably 100 years can go away very fast. And the things that we've bought, we created in the last 50 to 30 years can go away like that, i.e. the internet. The internet is not eternal. The internet is not for all time, forever. This thing that we have is very fragile, and it can be disrupted and it can be destroyed very easily. And I want people to understand that because, again, I see people where to some extent, most of us are reliant on the internet. I don't know what that extent is. Maybe it's 3% of your life. Maybe it is 93% of your life. But a lot of us are very reliant on this medium that we use, on this internet thing floating out there. And I recommend to people, as part of your self-reliance plan, is to actually not use the internet. It's a wonderful tool that we get to use. But think about, if it wasn't there, how would you actually survive? How would you actually continue to live? So build in that redundancy, build in that resilience into your life. All right, that's it for today, gang. Thanks heaps, everyone, for joining me today. I really appreciate that. Hopefully there was something in my ramblings today that was helpful for you. Thanks heaps for the questions. Thanks heaps for the comments that people were putting in there. If you've got any questions that you want to ask me, please feel free to chuck them to me. I'm always really happy. If you've got any news or information that you see that you think, oh, that's super important, and I'd like to hear this guy ramble on about it, send it through to me, because I really always appreciate that. And if you're having any victories and wins, if you've grown any little things in your garden, if you've started a garden, if you've got a go bag, if you've got a new knife or something that you've bought, I love that stuff. I'm a gear bandit. So send that stuff through to me. Always love to chat to people about that sort of stuff. It's really cool stuff. Just a reminder, 7 o'clock tonight, Sydney Freedom Community will be hosting a live. I'll be on it. Lauren will be on it. Evelyn will be on it. And a bunch of other people who are going to be talking at the Free at the Sea Festival on Saturday, Bondi, 1 p.m. We'll be talking on this live tonight. So jump on that. Check it out. Don't know how long I'll be on for, maybe 30 seconds, maybe 5 minutes, but I'll be there. Or I could just be sitting there staring and smiling at the camera or looking blankly. But anyway, until next time, keep preparing, stay safe, and Semper Paratus.